Sunday night. A family gathering, full of forced laughter, fake smiles, and the clinking of wine glasses. The kind of night where appearances mattered more than reality. I sat at the dining table, listening to the hum of conversation, watching my wife, Lena, bask in the attention. She was always the loudest in the room, always the one making jokes at someone's expense. Tonight, that someone was me. "Fight? Please," she said, waving a dismissive hand as she leaned back against her chair. "I control his money, so he'll never leave." Laughter. Her parents, her brother, her cousins. It rolled through the room like a wave, effortless and cruel. I didn't laugh. I barely even blinked. I just watched her. The way she soaked it in, the way she smirked like she had just delivered the punchline of the century. The way she didn't even glance at me. She thought she was untouchable. That's what got me. Not just the comment, no, that was nothing new. It was the complete, utter confidence. The certainty that I was trapped. That I was too weak, too stupid, too dependent on her to do anything about it. She had no idea. No idea that I had read every message between her and Ryan. No idea that I knew about the hotel receipts, the lunch dates that weren't business meetings, the lies she had fed me so easily that I almost admired the effortlessness of it. No idea that I had spent weeks, months, quietly planning the moment I would turn her world inside out. And tonight was that moment. I glanced around the room at the people who thought they knew us. Her parents, who always told me how lucky I was to have her. Her brother, who once pulled me aside and told me, "Lena's a handful, but she keeps you in line." Her cousin, who was on his third glass of wine and wouldn't remember a thing by morning. They all thought they were watching a happy couple. A well-oiled machine. The successful wife, the supportive husband. They thought I was the weak one. Let them think it. Let them believe it for a few more minutes. I let the conversation flow around me, my expression neutral, my hands loose on the stem of my wine glass. Lena, caught up in her own ego, barely noticed I hadn't responded. "Besides," she continued, shaking her head with a smug little grin, "where would he even go? He couldn't survive without me." A few more chuckles. Her father, shifting in his seat. Her mother, hiding a knowing smile behind her glass. They thought this was normal. They thought this was fine. I exhaled slowly. All right, game on. I let the laughter settle. Let them sip their drinks. Let Lena bask in the moment. Let the false sense of security wrap itself around her like a warm blanket. She thought she had me figured out. She thought I was the same man I'd been for years. The one who nodded along, who let things slide, who kept the peace no matter how many little humiliations she stacked on my shoulders. She had no idea how much I had changed. I swirled the wine in my glass, watching the deep red liquid move, thinking about how much I had prepared for this night. Every detail was lined up perfectly. The digital breadcrumbs she didn't know I had collected. The bank accounts she didn't realize had shifted. The conversations I had carefully placed in motion over the past month, with lawyers, with financial advisors, with people she wouldn't even suspect. And Ryan. Poor, pathetic Ryan, so arrogant, so sure that he had won. If only he knew. Lena stood from her seat, still glowing from her own brilliance, and stretched. "I need to check something in the kitchen." A meaningless excuse, but I knew where she was really going. The same place she always went when she needed a hit of validation. Her phone. She never left it unattended anymore. Not since I started watching her closer. Not since she started living two lives. I could picture it already. Her slipping away to the hallway, swiping open her messages, typing something to him. Maybe it would be a single word, something teasing. Maybe a picture of her drink with a caption like, "Wish you were here instead." Something small. Something just for him. She thought she was being careful. She had no idea. I let her go. Didn't even glance her way. Instead, I turned my attention to her father, who was still nursing his scotch like it held the meaning of life. The man barely tolerated me. I knew it. He thought I was passive, too soft, too dependent on his daughter's success. I had overheard him tell Lena, years ago, that I needed to step up if I ever wanted to be truly respected. Oh, he was about to see me step up. I set my glass down, slow and deliberate. "You know," I said casually, keeping my voice light, easy. "It's funny Lena says she controls the money." Her father's head lifted slightly, eyes narrowing just a fraction. Oh, I shrugged. Just interesting is all. Considering she doesn't actually have access to our main accounts anymore. Silence. Just for a beat. Then her brother let out a short, surprised laugh. Wait, what? Her mother shifted uncomfortably. I didn't look at her. I kept my focus on him, the man who had spent years thinking his daughter ran the show. Lena's great at a lot of things, I continued, keeping my expression neutral. But finance isn't one of them. She's impulsive. We both know that. I tilted my head slightly, as if sharing a secret. So, I started handling things differently, quietly, just to make sure everything's secure. You understand. He understood. I saw it in his face. A flicker of something, respect. Maybe the first time I'd ever seen it directed at me. Lena's mother cleared her throat. I'm sure she just meant it as a joke. Of course, I agreed. Jokes can be fun. I waited. 5 seconds. 10. Then, right on cue. Lena? Her mother called out. Dear, come back for a second. Footsteps. Quick. Slightly uneven. I already knew. She checked her phone, and the transfer hit. The moment she walked in, I saw it. The panic. The way she was trying to hold it together. But her fingers were tight around her phone. Her jaw just a little too clenched. She had seen it. The account was empty. The one she thought I never paid attention to. The one she had been skimming from, thinking I wouldn't notice the extra transactions. The weekend work trips that were really romantic getaways. Paid for with our money. She knew. And I knew she knew. I leaned back in my chair, relaxed, like I had all the time in the world. Something wrong, Lena? She tried to recover. I watched it happen in real time. The flicker of panic, the slight widening of her eyes, the way her grip on her phone tightened just a fraction too much. Then, like the seasoned liar she was, she smoothed it all over in an instant. A quick breath, a flick of her hair, a practiced smile. But I had been watching her for months. I knew all her tells. She forced a small laugh. No, just something work-related. Work-related, right? Because all major work crises happen at 8:30 p.m. on a Sunday night, in the middle of a family gathering, with a notification that drained her personal savings account down to exactly $0. I didn't respond. I just kept watching her. She was unraveling, and she knew it. Her mother was still watching her, too, waiting for her to sit back down. Lena hesitated for half a second, then moved toward her chair with a stiffness that wasn't there before. She perched on the edge, one leg crossed tightly over the other, one hand resting too carefully on her lap while the other still clutched her phone like a lifeline. I let the silence stretch. The longer I waited, the more uncomfortable she became. Her father finally cleared his throat. So, he turned to me, like he wanted to steer the conversation back to something safe. You were saying something about finances? Lena's head snapped toward me so fast I thought she might get whiplash. Her eyes, sharp, calculating, desperate, locked onto mine. I smiled. Just a small one. Just enough. Right? I said, as if I had almost forgotten. I was just saying how it's funny Lena thinks she controls the money. Since, she doesn't. The room shifted. I felt it. The weight of attention turning toward her. The way her family suddenly wasn't just laughing along with her anymore. There was a question hanging in the air now. A question she hadn't expected. She wet her lips. What are you talking about? I tilted my head slightly, feigning innocence. Oh, come on, Lena. You're the one who said it. I just thought it was interesting, considering, recent changes. Her fingers curled slightly around her phone. What changes? She was buying time, trying to piece things together, trying to figure out how much I knew. I let out a quiet chuckle. You really haven't checked? That landed. A flash of something raw, fear, real fear, crossed her face before she could mask it. She had checked. Of course she had. And she had seen. I turned slightly in my seat, facing her more fully. I wanted to see her face for this. I moved the money, Lena. There. The truth. Not the full extent of it, not yet. But enough. Just enough to let her know that her reality had changed. Her jaw tightened. What do you mean, you moved it? I shrugged. Exactly what it sounds like. She laughed, sharp and humorless. That's not possible. Why not? I asked lightly. Because she cut herself off, stopping just short of admitting it. Just short of saying, because I've been using that account to fund my affair. Because I need that money. Because you weren't supposed to notice. Instead, she took a different approach. The same one she always did when she wanted control back. She scoffed, shaking her head like she was disappointed in me. I don't know what you're trying to prove, but if you're playing some kind of game. A game, I repeated, raising an eyebrow. Lena, you made a joke first. I'm just playing along. Her fingers flexed. I could see her debating how to handle this. She wasn't used to being on the defensive. She was used to me being the one scrambling, explaining, apologizing. Not tonight. I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice just enough that it felt like a private moment, despite everyone in the room watching. You should probably check the other account, too. She hesitated. And then, unable to help herself, she looked down and swiped her screen. 3 seconds. That's all it took. Her entire body stiffened. Her breath hitched so faintly that no one else would have caught it. I did. I knew what she was seeing. The second account. The one she thought I didn't know about. The one where she had quietly been moving money. Money she planned to take when she eventually left. Money she had siphoned from our shared savings. From the little roundup transfers she thought I wouldn't notice. From the bills that somehow never quite matched what they were supposed to be. That account? Also empty. She looked at me. Really looked at me. And in that moment I saw it. For the first time in years, Lena didn't see me as the quiet, easy, predictable man she had built me into. She saw me as something else entirely. And she was afraid. Lena's face drained of color. It was subtle. Just a slight loss of warmth in her cheeks. A tightening of the skin around her eyes. But I caught it. She was a master manipulator. But in this moment, she wasn't in control. And she knew it. She forced a breath, gripping her phone so tightly I thought she might snap it in half. I don't know what you think you're doing, she said, her voice low, carefully measured. But this isn't funny. Funny, I repeated, feigning confusion. Lena, you were the one making jokes earlier. I just figured, why not join in? Her mother shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension that was no longer disguised. Her father sat a little straighter, eyes darting between us. Her brother had stopped mid-sip, watching intently. This was no longer just a casual dinner conversation. Lena knew she had to act fast. She took a deep breath, smoothing a hand over her dress like she was physically wiping away the panic. Then she turned to her family and laughed, shaking her head. This is ridiculous. He's obviously trying to make some kind of point, but I don't know what it is. I smiled, slow and deliberate. Don't you? She met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw real doubt flicker behind hers. She didn't know how much I knew. She didn't know how deep this went, and she was terrified to find out. She turned back to her father. Dad, you know how I handle things. I don't know what he's trying to say, but actually, I interrupted. Your father doesn't know how you handle things. Not really. None of them do. The room stilled. I leaned back in my chair, my posture relaxed, but my eyes locked onto hers. See, you've spent so much time making sure everyone believes your version of us. The responsible wife, the devoted partner, the one who keeps things in order while her husband just follows along. I exhaled, shaking my head slightly. But that's not the truth, is it, Lena? Her jaw clenched. What the hell are you even talking about? I tilted my head. All right, let's test something. I turned to her father. Did you know Lena has 2 credit cards you don't know about? His brows pulled together. What? Lena snapped her gaze to me. That's not true. I kept my eyes on her father. I can prove it. Lena let out a sharp laugh. This is insane. Of course, I have credit cards. Everyone does. That doesn't mean. One of them has a $7,800 balance on it. I continued smoothly. Mostly spent at high-end restaurants, designer stores, and, oh, look at that, hotels. The air in the room shifted. Lena's mother inhaled sharply. Her brother sat forward in his chair. Her father's grip on his glass tightened. Lena's reaction was instant. She barked out a laugh, shaking her head as if she had never heard something more ridiculous. Are you serious? You think I'm cheating because I bought some clothes and had work dinners? Her voice was dismissive, but I saw it. The way her throat moved as she swallowed. The way her fingers twitched against her phone. She was scrambling. I let her have her little performance. Let her pretend, for just a second longer, that she still had control. Then I pulled out my phone. "Since you're so confident," I said casually, tapping my screen a few times, "why don't we take a look together?" Lena went completely still. The color returned to her face. But now it was flushed. Not from embarrassment. Not even from anger. From sheer, unfiltered panic. "Here," I said, turning the screen toward her. "Tell me if anything looks familiar." A screenshot. Clear as day. The last charge on the card. $312 at the Grand Lexington Hotel. The date? Just last weekend. The time? 1:34 a.m. She wasn't on a business trip. She wasn't working late. She was there. With him. The moment her eyes landed on it, she froze. Her reaction was everything I needed. Everything her family needed to see. Her father's expression hardened. "Lena," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Explain this." Her mother pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes wide. Her brother just stared, expression unreadable. Lena's breath was shaky when she spoke. I don't know what this is." I exhaled a short, humorless laugh. "Lena, come on. You're better at lying than that." Her eyes snapped to mine, filled with hatred. She wasn't panicked anymore. She was furious. "You went through my stuff?" She spat. "I went through our accounts," I corrected. "Big difference." She let out a breath through her nose, nostrils flaring. "I can't believe you would. Believe it." I cut in, my voice calm. "Even. Because this is just the beginning." Lena stared at me, a storm raging behind her eyes. 1,000 thoughts flying through her head, each more frantic than the last. And then she stood. Not in defeat, in attack mode. Because when a liar gets caught, they don't admit it. They double down. Lena stood up so fast her chair nearly toppled over. Here it comes. The shift. The moment when a liar realizes the walls are closing in and their only way out is to turn the attack around. Her face was flushed now, her breathing sharp. She wasn't looking at the evidence anymore. No, that wasn't her move. Instead, she zeroed in on me, her hands curling into fists at her sides like she was about to unleash hell. "You are so pathetic," she hissed, voice shaking. I smiled. "Am I?" "Yes," she snapped, throwing a hand toward the table. "Look at you, sitting there all smug, acting like you're some kind of mastermind. You're a joke." She let out a sharp, humorless laugh, turning toward her father. "Dad, can you believe this? He went through my personal finances, tracked my spending, and now he's trying to humiliate me in front of my family like some kind of psychotic control freak." Her father didn't say a word. Her mother's lips were pressed into a tight, thin line. Her brother, usually her biggest defender, was just watching. And that was the problem, wasn't it? She expected outrage. She expected them to jump in, to take her side without question, to immediately turn the attack on me. But no one moved. No one spoke. They were waiting, because deep down, whether they wanted to admit it or not, they saw it. They saw her panic. They saw her deflecting. And they saw the truth sitting right in front of them, undeniable, in the form of cold, hard numbers on a phone screen. She was losing, and she knew it. Her hands curled tighter. "I am not going to sit here and be disrespected like this." "Disrespected," I repeated, tilting my head. "Interesting word choice. You know, since you've been using my money to fund hotel stays with another man." Her jaw clenched. "That's not true." I nodded. "You're right." I turned my phone back toward myself, swiping to the next screenshot. Because if we're being specific, it wasn't just hotels. There's a lot of interesting purchases in here. Fancy dinners, jewelry, even a little boutique men's clothing store. I don't remember getting a gift recently, so I have to wonder. I lifted my eyes to hers, watching her carefully. "Who were those for, Lena?" Silence. Thick, suffocating, damning silence. Then, "Are you seriously doing this here?" She spat, gesturing wildly at her family. "At a goddamn family dinner? You couldn't wait to embarrass me in private." I let out a soft, amused breath. "Embarrass you?" Her expression flickered, just for a second. She knew she had made a mistake. She had just admitted that she wasn't denying the spending, that she wasn't denying the affair, only that she was upset I was exposing it here, in front of witnesses. And just like that, I watched the power shift completely. Her father exhaled sharply, shaking his head. Jesus, Lena. Her mother covered her mouth, her eyes filling with something between disappointment and exhaustion. Her brother scoffed under his breath. It was over. She could see it now. But she wouldn't go down without a fight. Her head snapped back to me, her eyes wild. You are a bitter, pathetic, insecure little man. That's what this is about, isn't it? You can't stand the fact that I'm more successful than you, that I don't need you. You've been looking for a way to bring me down for years. And now what? You think you've won? She leaned in, lowering her voice into something ugly and sharp. You'll never be anything without me. I held her gaze, unflinching, calm, completely unaffected. And that was what broke her. Not the money, not the evidence, not even the fact that her family had turned silent, their expressions carefully neutral. It was the fact that she couldn't control me anymore. She had built an entire marriage on power, on manipulation, on knowing that I would always back down, always give in, always let her win. And now, she had nothing left. I leaned forward, my voice quiet, just for her. You're wrong, Lena. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. Because I've already won. I stood, straightening my jacket. Slipping my phone into my pocket like this was just another casual conversation. Then I reached into my other pocket and pulled out a crisp, neatly folded envelope. Her eyes flicked to it, then back to me, brows pulling together. What is that? I smiled, dropping it onto the table in front of her. Divorce papers. She inhaled sharply. And just so you know, I continued, straightening my sleeves, I filed them months ago, before I even moved the money, before I even started collecting proof. I wanted to see how far you'd go, how deep you'd dig your own grave. I tilted my head slightly, watching the rage flicker across her face, the realization that she had never been in control to begin with. You didn't just lose tonight, Lena. I smiled. You lost the second you underestimated me. And with that, I turned and walked out the door. The night air hit me like a cleansing wave, cool, crisp, and untouched by the suffocating tension I had just left behind. As I stepped off the porch and onto the driveway, I didn't feel the weight of what had happened pressing down on me. No regret, no second-guessing, just a deep, quiet sense of satisfaction. I had won, but I wasn't done yet, because while Lena sat inside, her world crumbling, there was still one loose end that needed tying up. Ryan. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my messages until I found what I was looking for. A text thread. One she didn't know existed. One I had set up myself. Ryan had no idea I had his number. No idea that I had been watching. But he was about to find out. I tapped out a quick message. Hey, Ryan. You might want to check in on Lena. She's having a rough night. I barely had time to pocket my phone before the front door slammed open behind me. Lucas. Here we go. I turned, slowly, just in time to see Lena storming out of the house. Divorce papers clenched in her fist like she wanted to set them on fire. Her family was still inside, frozen in place, unsure whether to intervene or let the storm run its course. She stomped toward me, her face twisted with fury, steps sharp and unhinged. You think you're so goddamn smart, she spat, stopping just inches away from me. You think you're some genius mastermind, pulling all these little strings, making me look like the bad guy. I raised an eyebrow. You are the bad guy, Lena. Her hand twitched. Not like she was going to hit me, no, she wasn't that stupid. But she wanted to. I could see it. The frustration, the desperation, the realization that she had played herself into a checkmate. You're ruining my life, she seethed. I let out a short, amused breath. No, Lena, you ruined your life. I just made sure you couldn't pretend otherwise. She exhaled sharply through her nose, shaking her head as if she could force me into a different response, a different reaction. The old Lucas, the one who would have panicked, backpedaled, tried to fix things. But that man was dead, and in his place stood someone she never saw coming. Her grip on the papers tightened. You really think this is going to go the way you planned? that you're going to walk away from this clean. She laughed, sharp and ugly. Oh, you're in for a surprise, Lucas. You're not as untouchable as you think you are. Threats. The last desperate weapon of someone who had already lost. I smiled. You're right. I'm not untouchable. I took a small step forward, lowering my voice just enough that she had to strain to hear. But you're completely powerless now. No money, no control. No one left to back you up. I let the words sink in before delivering the final blow. And Ryan? He's about to find out just how badly you screwed him over, too. Her breath hitched. There it was. The real panic. I stepped back, satisfied, and turned to leave. But then, a new sound cut through the air. A car, pulling up to the curb. I glanced over my shoulder, just in time to see a sleek, black BMW roll to a stop. The headlights flicked off. The door opened, and out stepped Ryan. Right on cue. Lena's entire body went stiff. She turned slowly, like she was hoping, praying, that it wasn't him, that I was bluffing, that I hadn't actually set this up so perfectly. But no, there he was, and the second his eyes landed on me, I saw it. Confusion, wariness, realization. He knew who I was, and that meant he knew exactly why I was here. Lena spun back to me, her expression slipping into pure horror. You! I just smiled. Then I stepped back, folded my arms, and let the show begin. Ryan hesitated for a moment, lingering by his car like he was debating whether or not to get back in and drive the hell away. But it was too late for that. Way too late. Lena turned fully toward him now, her entire posture a mess of panic and calculation. Ryan! She started, voice high, tight, unnatural. What are you doing here? I couldn't help but let out a small, amused breath. What was he doing here? Oh, she knew damn well. Ryan's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to me, then back to Lena, then to the crumpled divorce papers still clutched in her hands. His face shifted, understanding, and then dread, because he wasn't stupid. He was a lot of things. A liar, a cheater, a man willing to get into bed with another man's wife, but he wasn't dumb. He knew exactly what was happening. Lena saw it too. Saw him figuring it out in real time, and she panicked. Listen, I can explain. Ryan let out a short, bitter laugh. Explain, he scoffed, shaking his head. Lena, what the hell is going on? Lena's eyes darted to me for a split second. So fast that most people wouldn't have caught it. But I did, and so did Ryan. Because the moment she looked at me, his entire body went rigid. His nostrils flared. His jaw locked. He turned back to her, voice sharp. Does he know? Lena hesitated. Just for a second. But that was all he needed. Jesus Christ, Ryan muttered, running a hand through his hair, pacing away for a moment like he physically needed the space to process the reality of the situation. Are you serious? He let out a sharp breath, then spun back around. You told me you had this under control, Lena. You told me. I do, she snapped a little too fast. Ryan barked out another laugh. Yeah? Because it sure as hell doesn't look like it. I smiled, folding my arms across my chest. This was going even better than I expected. Lena wasn't just panicking now. She was losing him, and she knew it. Ryan, she started again, reaching for him, but he jerked his arm away. Don't, he snapped, shaking his head. Just don't. His eyes flashed with something dark, something angry. How much does he know? I decided to help her out. Everything, I said simply. Ryan exhaled through gritted teeth, then let out another dry laugh. Of course he does. He turned to me now, squaring his shoulders, trying to regain some kind of ground. All right, man. You got what you wanted. You exposed her. You humiliated her. What do you want now? Huh? You want me to apologize? Feel bad for you? He scoffed. Because trust me, you're not the only one who got screwed over here. I blinked. Then I let out a slow, amused breath. Ryan, I said, voice calm, steady, deadly controlled. You really think you're a victim here? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I stepped forward, just enough to let the weight of my presence settle in. You slept with my wife, I continued, voice low and even. You lied to me. You used my money to play house with her. I tilted my head. And now you want me to believe you were somehow wronged? Ryan didn't respond, because there was nothing to say. He was exposed just like her. And the best part? They were turning on each other. Lena turned to Ryan, eyes wild. Wait, what do you mean? Not the only one who got screwed over? Ryan scoffed. Oh, come on, Lena. You really think I didn't notice? The extra spending? The bullshit excuses? You played me just as much as you played him. He gestured toward me without even looking. How much of what you told me was even real? Lena blinked. Ryan, was I just another check on your little list? He snapped, eyes flashing. Another idiot to pay for your crap while you lined your pockets? Lena flinched. Ryan shook his head, laughing bitterly. Jesus, I actually thought. He let out a sharp breath. Doesn't matter. And then, he turned to me, and he did something I wasn't expecting. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his own envelope, and threw it at Lena's feet. Lena stared, and so did I. What is that? She asked, voice unsteady. Ryan exhaled. A breakup settlement. Lena's breath hitched. What? You think I was going to leave my wife for you? Ryan scoffed, shaking his head. Nah, Lena, that was never the plan. And there it was, the final, brutal truth. Lena had spent months thinking she was playing everyone, thinking she had all the power. And in a matter of minutes, it was all gone. Her marriage? Over. Her affair? Worthless. Her power? Destroyed. Ryan turned back to me, his expression unreadable. I'm out. I nodded. Smart move. Then, without another word, Ryan walked back to his car, slammed the door, and drove away, leaving Lena standing in the wreckage of the life she thought she had built. And me? I just smiled, because it wasn't over. Not yet. Lena stood there, completely still, as Ryan's taillights disappeared down the street. The same man she had betrayed me for had just tossed her aside like yesterday's trash. And for the first time tonight, she had nothing to say. No sharp words. No manipulative comebacks. No fake laughter to smooth over the cracks. Just silence. I let it hang there, stretching it out. Let her feel it. Then, finally, she moved. Slowly, almost robotically. She bent down and picked up the envelope Ryan had thrown at her feet. Her fingers trembled slightly as she flipped it over, pried it open, and pulled out the neatly folded documents inside. I watched as her eyes darted over the words. Watched as her lips parted just slightly, as reality sank in. Because she had been right about one thing. Ryan hadn't just dumped her. He had screwed her over in the process. Unbelievable, she muttered under her breath. I stepped closer, just enough to loom over her slightly. Just enough to make sure she knew she was truly alone now. Problem, Lena? Her jaw clenched as she flipped through the pages, scanning line after line of legal jargon she clearly wasn't prepared for. And I already knew why. Ryan wasn't just walking away. He was making sure she couldn't touch him on the way out. I had expected as much. He was a cheater, sure, but he wasn't an idiot. The moment he realized the true depths of Lena's deception, he had gone straight into self-preservation mode, which meant that whatever money she thought she was getting from him, gone. Whatever promises he had made about a future together, erased. Ryan had done to Lena exactly what she had been planning to do to me. And the irony? It was beautiful. Her breath hitched slightly as she reached the last page, the one that confirmed, in no uncertain terms, that Ryan had legally blocked her from receiving a single cent. No, she whispered. I smirked. Yes. Her grip on the papers tightened, fingers curling into the edges like she wanted to tear them apart. He can't do this, she stammered, shaking her head. This wasn't, he said. You really thought he was going to leave his wife for you? I interrupted, voice mocking. That he'd throw away his entire life for someone who was just as disloyal as he was? She snapped her head up, eyes blazing. Shut the hell up, Lucas. I grinned. Why? You don't like hearing the truth. Her nostrils flared. Good. I wanted her to break. Face it, Lena, I continued, tilting my head. Ryan was just using you, just like you used me. The only difference. I let out a quiet chuckle. He was smart enough to get out before you could do to him what you did to me. Go to hell, she spat. I laughed. A genuine, full laugh. Lena, You're the one who's already there. Her hands shook, whether from rage, humiliation, or sheer powerlessness. I wasn't sure. Probably all three, and I wanted her to sit in it. For years, she had been the one with the upper hand. The one calling the shots, pulling the strings, making the rules. Now, she had nothing. I stepped back, finally giving her space, but not before delivering the final blow. Have fun explaining this to your parents, I said, gesturing toward the house. Pretty sure they're still waiting inside. Her breath caught, because she had forgotten that her family had witnessed everything. Her mother, who had once gushed about how strong and independent Lena was. Her father, who had always believed his daughter was the one in control. Her brother, who had defended her every bad decision, until tonight. They had seen the evidence, heard the confrontation, watched as she lost everything. And now, she had to go back inside and face them. I smirked as I turned away, heading toward my car. And for the first time since this all started, Lena didn't follow me. She just stood there, alone, silent, and completely, utterly defeated that I slid into my car, shutting the door with a quiet finality that felt damn near poetic. The engine rumbled to life beneath my fingers, but I didn't drive away. Not yet. Instead, I sat there for a moment, watching her in the rearview mirror. Lena was still standing on the driveway, gripping Ryan's useless settlement papers like she could somehow squeeze money out of them if she held on tight enough. Her shoulders were rigid, her breathing erratic. She wasn't even looking at me anymore. She was staring at the house, because she knew what was waiting for her inside. The judgment, the disappointment, the fallout of her own actions. Her family had believed in her. They had always thought she was the one in control, the one who had everything figured out. Now, she was the woman who had lied, who had cheated, who had lost everything in the span of a single night. And she had to walk back in there and own it. I wished I could say I felt bad, that some part of me wanted to stay and see if she would turn it around, try to salvage whatever dignity she had left. But I didn't, because Lena was never going to admit she was wrong. She wasn't built for it. She was built for control, for manipulation, for bending people to her will. And tonight, for the first time, she had met someone she couldn't break. I had won, and she would rather burn in her own ruin than admit it. I exhaled, shaking my head as I finally shifted into drive. Enough of this. She wasn't my problem anymore. But just as I started rolling forward, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting maybe a message from my lawyer, or an update from the bank confirming the last of my financial transfers. Instead, a number I didn't recognize. I frowned. Then, out of pure curiosity, I answered. Hello. Silence. Just for a second. Then, Lucas. The voice was familiar. Too familiar. I blinked, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Ryan. Another beat of silence. Then a long, slow sigh. Yeah. What the hell? I pulled the car back into park, my mind already racing through the possibilities. Why was Ryan calling me? We weren't friends. Hell, we weren't even rivals at this point. He had no reason to talk to me ever again. And yet, here he was. You got a minute? He asked, his tone strangely calm. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I glanced back in the mirror at Lena, who was still frozen in place like a woman watching her own execution. Then, finally, I exhaled. I'm listening. Ryan let out another breath, quieter this time. Look, man, I know you hate me. I get it. I'd probably hate me too. Probably, I repeated dryly. He let out a humorless chuckle. Okay, definitely. But here's the thing. I don't think you know the full story. I frowned. Oh, this should be good. Ryan shifted on the other end of the line, like he was debating something. Then, finally, Lena's been lying to both of us. What? I sat up straighter, my pulse ticking up. Explain. Ryan exhaled sharply. You think I was the only one, Lucas? You think it was just me? He scoffed. She's been playing this game for a long time, and I think... He hesitated. I think there's someone else. The words landed like a blow to the gut. Not because I was surprised. No, at this point, nothing about Lena's betrayal shocked me. But because I hadn't considered it. I had been so focused on her and Ryan, so dead set on exposing their affair, that I hadn't stopped to ask a bigger question. What if Ryan wasn't the only one? My grip on the phone tightened. How do you know? Ryan hesitated. Then, lower, almost reluctant, he admitted, because she did the same thing to me. My breath hitched. Ryan continued, voice tense now. I started noticing little things. Excuses that didn't add up. Nights she disappeared. Just like she did with you. He let out a bitter chuckle. And then, last week, I found something in her bag. A receipt from some bar across town. Place we've never been to. A place I know for a fact she wasn't at alone. I felt my jaw tighten. And you're just telling me this now? Look, I wasn't exactly in the best position to talk to you before, he muttered. And I didn't think it mattered. I thought I was the guy, the other man. But after tonight, he let out a slow breath. I don't think either of us were. The implication settled between us like a ticking bomb. Lena hadn't just played me, hadn't just played Ryan. She had played us both. And someone else. I swallowed, my pulse steady but harder now. Do you know who? A pause. Then, no, Ryan admitted. But I have a guess. My eyes flicked back to Lena in the rearview mirror. And for the first time all night I felt something new. Something I hadn't expected. Curiosity. Because if Ryan was right, if Lena had been running this game with someone else, then I needed to know who. Not because I cared. Not because I wanted revenge. But because I had already taken everything from her. And I wasn't done yet. I sat there, gripping the phone, my heartbeat steady but heavier now. Ryan had just thrown a grenade into the situation, and now I was holding it, pin pulled, timer ticking. Lena wasn't just cheating on me with Ryan. She was cheating on Ryan, too, with someone else. Someone I didn't even know existed until 2 minutes ago. I exhaled slowly, my eyes flicking up to the mirror again. Lena still hadn't moved. She was standing in the exact same spot, her head slightly bowed, shoulders stiff. From this angle, she almost looked small. Good. She should. Because her entire world was about to get even smaller. I turned my attention back to Ryan, keeping my voice level. Who's your guess? Ryan hesitated. I could almost hear him debating whether or not to say it out loud. Then, quietly, reluctantly, Lena's boss. I blinked. I hadn't been expecting that. Her boss? I leaned back in my seat, frowning as I ran through the pieces in my head. Lena worked for a high-end marketing firm downtown. Her boss, Daniel Carter, was one of those smooth, well-dressed types. A man with a perfect marriage on paper, a house in the suburbs, a reputation that was as polished as his damn Italian leather shoes. I had met him a few times, shook his hand at company events, laughed at his jokes over overpriced cocktails. And all the while, the bastard might have been sleeping with my wife. Ryan exhaled into the phone. I don't have proof. But, I don't know, man. Some things just don't add up. She talked about him a lot. Defended him anytime someone at work had something bad to say. And she always made a point to say how professional their relationship was. Which, let's be real, he let out a humorless chuckle, is the kind of thing you only say when you're trying to convince yourself. I didn't respond right away, because something in my gut told me he was right. Lena had spent the last few months acting like she was untouchable, like she had everything planned, every detail locked into place. Of course she did, because she had a backup plan, a safety net, the third option. Ryan scoffed, shaking his head. You know what's funny? I actually thought for a while that she was using you. I exhaled through my nose. She was. Ryan paused. Yeah, he admitted. But the truth is, she was using both of us. Probably all of us. And that was the moment I knew. I was not walking away yet. Not until I saw just how deep this went. I drummed my fingers against the steering wheel, my mind already moving ahead. Lena thought she had lost everything tonight. She had no idea I was about to take even more. Ryan, I said slowly, you want to be done with her, right? A short, bitter laugh. Oh, I'm done, man. Good. I smirked. Because I think I have an idea. The next morning I woke up early. Before the sun had fully risen. Before the world had settled into its usual rhythm. I wasn't tired. I was wired. I showered, got dressed, and grabbed a cup of coffee before pulling out my phone and typing out a single message. Me, how fast can you get me a meeting with Daniel Carter? 10 minutes later, my lawyer responded. Lawyer, give me an hour. Perfect. 9:30 a.m. I walked into Carter and Associates like I had every right to be there. The receptionist barely looked up as I strode toward the executive floor, my footsteps steady, controlled, lethal. By the time I reached Daniel Carter's office, his assistant was already flustered. "Sir, I told you he's not expecting." I pushed open the door anyway, and there he was, sitting behind his sleek mahogany desk, completely unsuspecting. Daniel Carter, Lena's boss, her third option, his head snapped up, brows furrowing. "Can I help you?" I closed the door behind me, locking it with a soft click. Then I turned, smiled, and placed a single white envelope on his desk. His gaze flicked to it, then back to me. "What is this?" I took a seat, crossing one ankle over my knee, exuding pure, effortless control. "That," I said smoothly, "is what happens when you get caught." Silence. A long, heavy silence. And then, slowly, his face changed. Recognition. Then, alarm. Because he understood. He knew exactly why I was here. And suddenly, Daniel Carter looked very, very nervous. "Checkmate,"